is things I wish I could say in Sunday school. I want to share some thoughts and ideas that are different than what we usually hear. My goal is to be really honest rather than inherently faith-promoting. I hope these ideas may spark some interesting discussions with your friends, families, or classes. Please enjoy. This is the lesson for July 13th through 19th and July 20th through 26th. 2 Kings chapters 16 through 25 and 2 Chronicles chapters 14 through 20, chapter 26, and chapter 30. Today's topics are the scattering of Israel, Josiah, and lessons from Micaiah. I'm combining 2 weeks of material into one lesson today. Sometimes I have less commentary to share, and this method works well for me. I plan to do the same with the poetry section of the Old Testament. The big event in this section is the scattering of Israel. In this section, the 10 tribes of the northern kingdom are conquered and scattered by the Assyrians. This happens in 721 BCE. Later, the southern kingdom is also conquered and scattered by Babylon around 587 BCE. These dispersions were not total. Obviously, there are still a lot of Jewish people in Jerusalem and the surrounding areas during Jesus' life and the New Testament. The scattering of Israel is the precursor to the gathering of Israel. What I think is really interesting about this is that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints makes a much, much bigger deal about this than all other religions outside of Judaism. Christian churches, if they care about the scattering of Israel at all, the only thing that they think is relevant is that a gathering needs to take place before Jesus' second coming. They believe this has already taken place with the creation of the nation of Israel after World War II. However, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints uses these ideas in entirely unique ways. The Church takes the position that Joseph Smith began the gathering of Israel by creating the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and that all of the Church's missionary work is part of the gathering of Israel. I am of two minds on this. First, I think it's incredibly narcissistic for Joseph Smith to claim that he's gathering Israel when he has no Jewish heritage. Not only no Jewish heritage, but also no connection to that part of the world. The Mormon gathering of Israel was to all the places Joseph Smith and the Mormons gathered. At the same time, I'm all for expansive understandings of ideas. So making the gathering of Israel not about Jewish people anymore and not about the land of Israel is a pretty bold take. The new idea is that it's all about Abraham's covenant. Of course, Abraham's covenant was about land and his specific descendants, so it doesn't really work completely. Saying everyone who joins the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is adopted into Abraham's covenant dilutes his covenant, making it for everyone, while also trying to elevate its importance. Anyway, these are my thoughts on the scattering and gathering of Israel. I judge Joseph Smith and the Church for co-opting the scattering and gathering of Israel. At the same time, I admire the bold take. Next up, I'm going to say a couple things about King Josiah. There are a lot of kings in these sections. I'm skipping most of them. Josiah was 8 when he became king. It seemed like he wanted to do right by his people. He discovered the scriptures, the law of Moses. It says in the 18th year of King Josiah. He feels awful about the last several kings and how they have disobeyed God's law and led the people to do the same. Then he teaches the law of Moses to his people. They covenant again, but it says it's too late. God still wants them to be destroyed for past sins, especially idol worship. When I read the story this time, initially I thought, okay, Josiah is king and he becomes a religious zealot. However, the more I read it through, my take on Josiah softened a lot. It seems like a lot to read the scriptures to your people when you're king, but when I was thinking about this more, I think it's more like he's teaching them their history rather than trying to convert them. It's extremely beneficial to understand history. We all know the oft-repeated idea that those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. The exact quote from George Santayana's 1905 book, The Life of Reason, actually says, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." The thing about religious zealots is that they are motivated by narcissism. They lean into the religiosity because it gets them attention and validation. I don't get that sense from Josiah. I think he's motivated by a desire to do right by his people. He wants them to know their history so they can make the best choices going forward. I think the manual wants Josiah's story to be simplified down to the power of the scriptures to convert and lead the people to choose the right, or whatever. One of the reasons I like this story is that the kingdom of Judah is still destroyed in the end. Josiah did the right thing, and although he couldn't fix Judah's trajectory, the individuals who started making better choices for themselves benefited greatly. It's not always about the end result. Sometimes it's about doing your best in the moment, regardless of the outcome. There are a couple of questionable conclusions in the manual I have to comment on during the story of Micaiah the prophet. The lesson manual tells us that we should have integrity like Micaiah. The heading is, I can defend the truth even when it's unpopular. Sure, we all want to have integrity. However, Micaiah felt immense consequences for his integrity. King Ahab had a contentious relationship with Micaiah. Micaiah was always prophesying stuff that wasn't in Ahab's favor. Ahab took it somewhat personally. Yet, Ahab clearly put stock in Micaiah and trusted him, probably in part because he was willing to tell the king hard things. Ahab asked about going up to battle. Micaiah answered that Ahab would lose. Then Ahab put him in prison under extra harsh conditions until he returned from battle. But Ahab lost the battle and was killed, and we don't hear about Micaiah again. So I have to imagine that he remained suffering in prison until he died. Ahab's son isn't going to release him. I want to point out something I find ironic. It seems like if Micaiah had been wrong and Ahab had won the battle and returned, then Ahab would release Micaiah from prison. So, if Micaiah was right, which he was, the consequence is prison forever. If Micaiah was wrong, if his prophecy was false, then he might be set free. Ironic consequences were in store for Micaiah no matter what. The lesson manual is encouraging us to defend God's truth like Micaiah. But the manual doesn't dwell on the real consequences Micaiah suffered. Prison is no joke. Micaiah's story isn't nearly as clean-cut as, say, Daniel in the lion's den. Micaiah also seemed like he took some weird joy out of disappointing Ahab. His initial response was sarcasm. That doesn't make what Ahab did to him okay. I'm just pointing out that Micaiah played into their screwed-up dynamic too. I wish the manual would have delved into some murky waters. Is it okay to withhold information if the anticipated consequences of complete honesty are dire? My personal opinion is that our heavenly parents would understand. What good can Micaiah do in prison? None. Also, think about all the scripture stories where a hero used deception and is treated as God-sanctioned. Abraham lies to the Pharaoh about Sarah being his sister. We covered Rahab at Jericho a while back. She lied to Jericho authorities to protect Israelite spies. And there are many, many, many others. I think it's super weird that the church wants to hold up Micaiah as an example to emulate when he was sent to prison in extra harsh conditions because he was too blunt with the king about God's prophecy. And the manual frames this as he is defending God's truth and he's a hero. I don't want my kids to think that they should be like Micaiah ever. Use some nuance and navigate out of the trap Ahab is setting for you. I believe loving heavenly parents would support this. That's it for this week. Thanks for listening. Please share with family and friends. Until next time.